Friends, enemies, lovers. Everyone has an agenda. Every night could be your last. Graduate or die.
Hi, friends. You're listening to Beyond the Pages with Sarah and Savannah.
We're going to be talking about Fourth Wing tonight, but a note before we begin. There will be spoilers for the first book. Also, all of our comments, opinions, and views are based on the first book only, as we have not read beyond that at the time of recording. Additionally, there are some events from the first book that we have deliberately decided not to talk about so that some of the excitement is still there for those who are currently reading or have not started reading Fourth Wing yet.
So, starting off in this book, I really enjoyed it. There was very little, world building. It just kind of jumped right into it. It was super engaging. There wasn't, a slow start.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's enough information to begin creating the world of Basgiath.
Basgiath. I listened to the audio, and Savannah reads the physical book.
So here I am making up words, as we all do, whenever we can't figure out how they're actually pronounced. But yeah, I just feel like the world was created just enough in order to get the book going, but that it wasn't super boring.
Yeah, I think that one of the great things about this, because it takes place at, for lack of a better word and using the term that they use, a college, people who have attended any sort of post-secondary education kind of know what to expect in terms of the relationships that are built going into it. You have the great friends and you have the not so great friends.
Yeah, exactly. So starting off, we have our main character.
Yeah, Violet.
Yeah. What do you think?
I love Violet. I love that despite the fact that she knows that she is weaker than just about everybody, she is going to do her best to prove everybody wrong.
And I kind of have the same mindset where I feel like they portray her as a weak person, and yet she wasn't a whiny character. She was smart, she had her own opinions, and she didn't really follow the pack.
Yeah, she's mentally stronger than just about anybody in the War College. I also love that she knows the rules and exactly how to break them or bend them to make it work for her.
Agreed.
Specifically, I'm talking about when she gets across the parapet and she has landed, but Jack is still on the parapet. He is not a cadet yet, and she threatens him with that knife.
So there's a couple of boys in this book that we kind of go a little back and forth, if you will.
Yeah.
The first one is Dane.
I liked Dane at the beginning because it felt like he was just the right level of protective, older brother, wanting to do what was best for Violet. But then I really didn't like him because that protective older brother turned into way overprotective, not letting Violet do anything she wanted to do or thought she was capable of.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that you liked him because I did not like him. I know that he was supposed to be her best friend, per se, because he's known Violet her whole life. Mm-hmm. And yet, he acts like he doesn't truly know her.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He treats her like this weak little girl, as the book is trying to portray her, but she's not. She's super strong, and her sister realizes that, too. Her sister's like, you have to do this, but don't get killed.
Yeah, I found that it was kind of, Dane knew Violet as the scribe. He didn't know her as the girl who had been training for the last few months to join the Rider Squadron, because she was a completely different person at that point. Yeah. And I love your comment about Mira, her sister. Mira stands up for Violet to a point. She will fight in Violet's corner until she knows that nothing's gonna happen.
Exactly.
And then she's like, okay, don't die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The question is, why does Mira fight for her sister, but Dane doesn't, even though they knew each other when they were children, and now they've been together, or they haven't been together for 1 year. Yeah. It's not like it's been 10 years, it's been 1.
Yeah, he won't break a single rule to protect. He wants Violet to survive and get away from the Riders Quadrant, but he won't break rules within the Riders Quadrant for her. Yeah. We'll talk about the events of Threshing later, yeah. But that's one example of where he won't break the rules, yeah. Even if it means she dies.
And yet, Dane is portraying the wannabe hero for Violet, mm-hmm. But really, he's the guinea pig, or so it seems, for the leaders.
Yeah, exactly. He is their puppet. And we learned that his signet power is he can read minds by touching people. And we don't know if it's only touching their heads or if it's any touch. Mm-hmm. But there were a number of times where I wondered, when did he learn some information and when did he share that with his superiors? Because there are some events where if the superiors knew about it early on, that would be very dangerous for Violet and for some of the other characters.
I love that you said that we don't know if his signet power is just by touching their head or another part of their body, because at the beginning of the book it does say that it only works if he touches their head.
But that's him telling us that.
Exactly. Is he actually telling the truth or just giving her bits and pieces of information?
Yeah. So there is another main male character that we're introduced to very early on, like right at the end of the first chapter, and that is Xaden Ryerson, mm-hmm. who he's supposed to be the bad guy. At least that's how you're introduced to him.
The leader of the Marked One.
Yeah, the leader of the Marked One. His father is responsible for killing Violet's brother, and you're supposed to not like him at the beginning. What did you think about him?
Well, he's the bad boy, mm-hmm. in the book. So you're kind of comparing him to Dane, and it's like, you're right, Dane is kind of like a brother figure, and Dane is the bad boy that you're not supposed to touch. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we all love a bad boy.
Yeah.
So Xaden, though, is kind of on Violet's wavelength. Like, he's very smart, and he wants the best for everyone. He's very kind, just like Violet. So you have no choice but to like him, despite the fact that you're not really supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he shows how much the people around him mean to him, specifically the other Marked Ones, with the gathering that Violet overhears in the woods at night. And you see that he is so caring for these people that he is responsible for. And you also see a little bit later how much he cares for the safety of just the other people in Basgiath and the War College, specifically Violet, even before things change between them. He is protective of her, but he does not baby her. He is almost the complete opposite of Dane. He knows that she needs to prove herself to herself. Mm-hmm. And I was, just as we were talking about this, I was kind of thinking about how Dane and Xaden are described physically. Dane is literally the golden boy, golden haired, and Xaden dark haired, dark skin, dark eyes. So they're literally described as polar opposites almost, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. So starting off with the first chapter, basically, the book kind of jumps into this challenge. There's 4 challenges in this book that Violet has to go through in order to kind of get through the first year of school. Mm-hmm. And it starts off with this parapet or balance beam.
200 meters in the air, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden, you know, there's this cloud that comes over and it's pouring rain and it's super scary. And I kind of feel like this parapet doesn't just, you know, it isn't just a challenge. It's kind of like a story in itself. Mm-hmm. It really focuses on Violet's kindness and intelligence and strength right off the bat. But it also shows like the conflict and the statistics of all of these kids dying, and there were friendships being made. There was the meeting of important characters.
Yeah, Violet meets the person who will become her best friend, Rhiannon, but also the person who will become her worst enemy in Jack. And you see, like you said, watch it, like seeing it, you see the statistics of how many people survive. Like the person, I think he's 2 before Violet, just falls, and he's dead. Yeah. And then there's there's Rhiannon, who would have died if it weren't for Violet switching shoes. Yep. because it was raining. Yep. And you also see the person behind Violet get killed by Jack, and it's you see how easy it is to die in the Riders Quadrant.
Yeah, and it kind of shows that this writer likes her main characters, which we described the main 3, but that she also sees that the side characters are just as important.
Mm-hmm. And it seems she doesn't want the readers to feel like the main characters and the major side characters are safe at any given moment.
Exactly.
You said something about Violet's intelligence, and there's something she does on the parapet, as well as during another challenge later on, that really rang true with me. She starts spouting facts about the Riders Quadrant, about Basgiath, about the whole world, and I was like, oh my god, I do that when I'm nervous. Like, I can spout off fan theories about books or movies or TV shows for an hour to calm me down if someone will let me. Yeah. And it was like, oh my god, I do that.
So moving on, the next challenge after she gets through this parapet goes right into sparring. Mm-hmm. With the sparring, for me, it can be good, but it can also be bad. But once again, the writer brings us into the thought process behind Violet and her tactics in order to try to win, because she's so weak.
Yeah,
I guess.
Physically weak.
But her mind is not weak.
Yeah.
She's very smart.
Yeah.
So during these sparring challenges, each one, something different happens.
There's a moment in the first chapter when Violet and Mira are in Violet's room before she goes across the parapet, where Mira is trying to help her survive, and she's allowed to keep one book, or Mira lets her keep a book because Violet says it's for killing people. And that's the book of poisons that she ends up using to defeat her opponents during sparring, for the most part. There are a couple times where the poison doesn't work, or she is forced to fight somebody else. Mm-hmm. Specifically, at one point, she has to fight Xaden, and he has not been poisoned, and he kicks her ass, but he shows her how he's kicking her ass. He's teaching her at the same point.
Yeah, I feel like her having those missteps with the poison really just made her winning that much better, because it wasn't like she kept winning. It was like, I'm kind of trying, but not really trying. It kind of played into her plan a little.
Yeah, exactly.
And with Xaden, I feel like that was the first time that they finally started showing a connection.
Yeah.
And you could feel it.
Yeah, and that was before other events that led them to be forced into a connection. So the next challenge is the gauntlet, which, if anyone's seen American Ninja Warrior, that is the gauntlet.
That is so funny because I literally thinking, like, this one actually made me think. It made me go, is this actually possible? And then I was like, you know what? Ninja Warriors.
Yeah, I was listening to this part in the car with my dad, and he was like, are they on American Ninja Warrior? And I was like, pretty much, because there's the warped wall at the top, there's spinning beams, there's all sorts of different things that they have to do to get up this wall. And Violet, because she's not only physically weak, she's small. She's a short woman. Like, I think it says she's like 5'2", which is how tall I am. But she can't physically reach to do some of the challenges. So she has to find another way to complete it. Because if she doesn't, essentially she's dead. Yeah. As I said at the beginning, graduate or die. And she does see somebody in her squad die on the gauntlet, and it is very impactful on her. Mm-hmm. And that's just during practice of it. Like, they have 9 tries at it before the day that they have to complete it. And this is another situation where Violet knows exactly how to break the rules and get away with it.
Yeah. You know, we never really talked about it, but she has this book that she received, and she has a few notes in it from her brother that her sister gave her.
And some notes from her sister, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but it doesn't always go back to that book. But in the back of your mind, it's like, is she only breaking this rule because she has a little bit of an insight?
Yeah. I mean, I know the first time, like at the beginning of the chapter before they do the gauntlet the first time, the first trial, there is a bit from the Book of Brennan, Violet's brother, that talks about how time doesn't matter. It's just get up there, stay alive, that kind of stuff. But it's also an interaction she has with Xaden before the final time they go up the gauntlet that convinces her, and she chooses to break those rules because it's not about how you get up. It's just about getting up.
Yeah. And when she got up, that was another example of Xaden, you know, breaking the rule, but still kind of staying within it, whereas Dane wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Dane was fighting against it almost. Exactly. Like, again, like I said, he's protecting her, but knowing that this is Xaden. I mean, he is being protective of her and fighting for her, but also letting her fight for herself.
Exactly.
Whereas Dane's like, you can't do that. So it's another situation. That I think that may have been about when I went from liking Dane to not liking Dane. Yeah. Was he's not fighting for her. Mm-hmm. Where Xaden is.
Yeah. I feel like Dane in this book, there's always somebody who's a whiner, and he is the whiner.
Oh my god, yes.
You know, everything that Violet does in this school, he's like, you can't do this, like, you need to go back to the writer's scribe. The scribe quadrant.
Yeah. He's saying it's not that you can't do it, you're not able to do it.
Yes. And it's like, come on, Dane.
Yeah. And so the last of the 4 big challenges is threshing.
Yeah.
And threshing is when you and the rider and the dragon choose one another.
Yeah.
And it's not clear, even in that world, what makes the dragons choose their rider.
Yeah.
But you do kind of get some idea of what makes them choose their rider with the dragons that choose Violet.
The thing that I didn't really understand is that earlier in the book, before threshing, they had to go through like a dragon
Tunnel.
so the dragons can see what they have this year for the students to bond with. But what I don't understand is if the dragon saw the people already, they know who they want to bond with.
I think so, yeah.
So why did they have to go into this area to kind of
Fight it out.
if the dragon already knows?
Well, I mean, Rhiannon, she ends up bonding with one of the green dragons that approaches Violet during that passage through the tunnel.
Yeah.
And, like, she knew from the moment that they saw the dragon that that was going to be the dragon she wanted. Yeah. And there's also a situation earlier in the book where they're being shown some of the dragons by one of the professors, and Jack... I do not like Jack.
No, I don't either.
You're not meant to like Jack. But he said they're shown an image of the black dragon that will eventually bond with Violet, and Jack says, he's mine. Yeah. And he's not even planning on being present to be bonded with.
Yeah.
Whatever that word should be.
But what's funny is that they did this book had a lot of foreshadowing in it.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a foreshadow of, the golden dragon as well. Mm-hmm. And during that tunnel of dragons, there was only the gold dragon. Mm-hmm. And then she bonded with the black dragon because there was only... Those two dragons were actually both of hers at the end.
Yeah.
There was one other person, I think, who ever bonded two dragons.
I don't think it ever happened.
I think it might have been one of those foreshadowings.
I don't think so. But with the black dragon, during that lesson with the professor, you learned that his previous rider had died trying to save Violet's brother. And at that point, I was like, that's going to be Violet's dragon. I knew that like 10 chapters earlier. I was like, that is going to be Violet's dragon, because despite the fact that Violet is physically weak and small, and this dragon is massive, there was a connection already there that Violet didn't know about, and Tarn, the black dragon, didn't know about either. But with the golden dragon, I think it was at least partly that it was because Violet defended the golden dragon from Jack, and I can't remember who the other two were, but 3 of the male cadets, that convinced Tarn to bond with Violet. It was because she was willing to fight for the weakest, the smallest, the one that is a hindrance to the wing.
Yeah, kind of like herself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Were you surprised that she had 2 dragons?
I had seen things about 2 dragons, about her having 2 dragons before starting the book, that I didn't know if it was she got a second dragon later on, but I knew that there was going to be 2 dragons that bonded with her.
Okay. Now, what about Xaden's dragon?
Sigale.
Yes. During that same time of threshing period, you learn that Taryn is actually bonded to Sigale.
Yeah, a mating bond. Yeah, so with that, that's what forces the bond between Xaden and Violet. And it's to the point where if one of them dies, the other dies. Yeah. Because the bonds are so strong between Taryn and Sigale and between Taryn and Violet. Yeah. So in reality, if Xaden can't protect Violet, he's gonna die himself.
Yeah. It's funny that you say if one dies, the other dies, because the very first quote in the book, whenever you open it up, is, again, telling you that this is going to happen.
Yeah, it's,
If a dragon without its rider is a tragedy.
A rider without its dragon is dead.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just pure hyperbole when I saw it the first time. And then you learn some things later on that it's not just hyperbole. It actually, if a dragon dies, their rider dies. But the dragon will still live on in most cases if the rider dies.
You know, the funny thing with Terran is that he's this really big black dragon, but really he is a really big softie.
He's a softie, and he's so sarcastic. And so is Andarna, the little gold dragon. They're so sarcastic, and I love it. There's a moment, I think, when Violet, right as Terran bonds with Violet, it's one of the first interactions they have. And he says, "You're bleeding. Stop it." And it's like, okay, this is a very clear idea of what the relationship between Violet and her dragons is going to be.
Yeah, which is great because leading up to this point, I don't feel like it was a funny book.
Mm-hmm. It's a war college. Yeah. It's a serious place.
Exactly. So it's it's nice to have a little bit of humor.
Yeah, I mean, there is a character, the character of Riddick, who he's a jokester, and he is meant to be like a prankster kind of thing, I think. But you don't actually really see him doing anything funny. No. So it just says he was joking, or he was making fun of something, or he was saying something funny. But it doesn't actually, it's still a very serious place. It's like boot camp. Basically. Now, like in this world. So
about halfway to 3/4 of the way through, this book really takes a really big turning point.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes from school to rebellion.
Yeah, the rebellion. We're introduced early on to some of the marked ones. This includes Xaden, but there's also a character named Imogen, who Violet fights, I think, in her first fight, and she breaks Violet's shoulder, or dislocates her shoulder. Yeah. And she hates Violet at the beginning because of what Violet's mother did. Yeah. Imogen's parents and Xaden's father and these other characters' parents, the marked ones' parents, were involved in a rebellion against the country. Yeah.
There's a section that Xaden does say, though. He's like, why are we punishing Violet for the things that her parents did? Same thing that's happening to them. And it made so much sense.
Yeah. And there's also the realization, or the idea that Xaden presents. She has just as much right to hate us as we do to hate her, because our parents are responsible for her brother's death. Exactly. Her mom is responsible for our parents' deaths. Yeah, exactly. So Imogen, because of the bond between Xaden and Violet, the marked ones kind of accept her. They stop hating her as much. Yeah. And Imogen is one of the main ones that does that. She starts training Violet to defend herself. She starts training her so that she can stay on her dragon better. Mm-hmm. And it's a really interesting flip.
Yeah, it is.
With specifically Imogen.
I also feel like, besides Imogen, with all of the upcoming fights that are in the book, again, we go back to that foreshadowing, because Violet read this book that her dad gave her time and time and time again, which she could not bring with her.
Yeah.
Her sister took it, but
her sister saved it for her.
She did save it, but it explained all of these creatures that are actually real.
Yeah, and that the government, to this point, have been saying either no longer exist or never existed to begin with.
Exactly.
So it's a question, what caused the rebellion that the Marked One's parents participated in? And was it the Venin and Wyvern that are in this book that they knew about, because the area where they lived was much closer to a foreign border where attacks were taking place by the Venin and Wyvern. And it's something I wonder about. Did they start this rebellion because the leadership of the government, including Violet's mom, were ignoring the attacks by these magical creatures?
Yeah. I feel like the flip in this book is a really good opening to what's to come. I was thinking that this was probably a possibility, considering it was a war college, and the first book is obviously the build-up to Violet becoming a dragon rider. But, you know, the second half of this story really bumps itself up in order to say what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. This is a war college, not just a college kind of thing. So with the rebellion and what's going on at the war college, there is, at the end of the semester, or the end of the year, there is a challenge that is meant to show the leadership of the wing leaders and of the upperclassmen, essentially. And Xaden chooses to take Violet with him to his posting for that challenge.
Which Dane also rejected.
Really fought against.
Yeah. And you wonder why. And then you find out.
That at that point, he knew that Xaden seems to have been working against the government, following in his father's footsteps.
Which brings us back to the fact that Dane is a guinea pig.
Yeah, he's a puppet. And we learn that there were things that Dane did pass on to the upper ranks, because Xaden is sent to a outpost that has been abandoned. And it has been abandoned because the government knows there's going to be an attack. And he receives a note that's essentially saying this is a test of your loyalty to the government. And it's either you leave this neighboring community to die, or you prove you're loyal and you save the rest of the people that are with you. And unfortunately, not everybody is saved in that situation, but he decides to defend the community. And the people that are with him, who are almost all Marked Ones except for Violet, they choose to stay with him. He gives them the choice to leave if they want to.
Which just shows that Xaden is once again proving that he is the better person in this story.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a very, very good leader as well. Yeah. Because he accepts the opinions of his underlings, and he uses them how they need to be used. Yeah. But also allows them to back out of being used.
Yeah, he lets them be their own person. You can make your own decision. It's up to you if you want to fight for peace. It's also up to you if you want to be part of the rebellion or the government.
Yeah.
But he's going to be on your side regardless.
Yeah, even with Violet, when she learned that essentially the rebellion had never died, had never ended, he gave her the choice to leave at that point, before they even found out that it was a trap.
Yeah, he did say, like I hope you stay, but you have the option to go back.
Yeah, and for someone like Violet, whose mother is majorly in charge, and whose sister is in charge, and whose brother died because of the rebellion. It was a very difficult decision for her, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not a difficult decision at all, because she has always fought for the weak ones.
The question is, though, going forward, is she going to become a double spy?
I don't know. Or is she going to be openly for the rebellion?
Exactly. And what happened if she doesn't go back? What happens to the side characters, the friends?
Yeah, the
That's
Riddick,
amazing.
the Rhiannon, the Dane.
Their stories are not finished.
No, they're barely even started.
So that is the question we hope to see answered in the next couple of books.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that this is supposed to be a 5-book series, so there's a lot of things that still need to be fleshed out, including characters and stuff like that. The relationship, where it stands between Violet and Xaden, where it stands between Violet and Dane, where it stands between Violet and her mom.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot that needs to be fleshed out still.
And it makes you wonder what the writer has in store for, twists and turns.
Yeah.
I did say that I hope that there's more. I know it's a war book, but I hope there's more romance.
Yeah, I want there to be enough romance, but
I hope the romance doesn't necessarily have to be between Violet and Xaden. I wonder if there might be a bit of a twist coming, or a romance or a love interest that we're not seeing, because the tension between Xaden and Violet is kind of still there.
Yeah.
Of the rebellion versus her loyalty to her mom and the government, and her, just finding out of what's actually happening in the world.
Yeah. I mean, there was kind of a situation where Violet thought there might have been another love interest early on with Xaden and Imogen. But he was like, no, Imogen doesn't like me. Imogen likes my cousin or my best friend, Garrick. And it was a very interesting dynamic that when you learn that. So what else are you looking forward to in the next 4 books?
Honestly, I'm really excited to see the development of the world outside of the War College. I want to see what else is out there, because Violet's world has been so sheltered that there's got to be more to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I desperately want Violet to go back to Basgiath and punch Dane in the face for setting them up and not warning her about the trap.
But I wonder if Dane his character will change a little bit as the books continue. I wonder if his mindset will change, and maybe he might join the rebellion as well.
You can hope, but I think because of what we know about Dane, that he does not break rules.
Do you think he'll become the bad guy in...
I don't necessarily think he'll be the bad guy, but I think he'll only join Violet and the rebellion if the government says, you're not a rebellion anymore, we're fighting with you. That's kind of what I think. So there's also a couple other things that we know we're going to have to learn in the next couple books. Specifically, what Violet's second signet is. Because every rider has a signet that is from their dragon. We know that her signet through Tarn is lightning wielding. So rare, incredibly destructive.
Yeah.
But we don't know what her signet through Andarna is. And I've seen some theories accidentally about what her signet may be. And Rebecca Yarros has said that all the information we need to find out Violet's signet is supposedly in the second book, Iron Flame. Like I said, we have not read Iron Flame yet, so we don't know for sure what any of this information is. However, there are two possible signets that I've seen as theories. The first is mending, like her brother is a mender. It would kind of balance out the destructive power of the lightning, and it would be kind of interesting that she could mend herself because she has had to have a mender treat her so many times in her life.
And what's the second one?
The second one is one of two things. Either she can talk to the dead or she can resurrect the dead. Because the rider who was Taryn's rider before Violet, he tried to resurrect the dead, and that is what killed him. Mm-hmm. But if that were her actual signet, it wouldn't kill her. There is apparently, as I said, I have not read the second book. I've only seen things on Instagram and TikTok. And apparently there is a scene in the second book where Violet communicates with a dead character. And it's, I think, meant to be she's hallucinating, but it could be that she is actually talking to that dead character.
I'm really enjoying the possibilities because both of those signets are very powerful.
And very rare as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
think she'll be a mender, only because her brother was one. Mm. I think it makes more sense to be able to resurrect.
Mm-hmm. I agree that I don't think it's the mending, because I think they say a few times that everything needs to be in balance. And I think her physical weakness is the counterbalance to the destructive power of the lightning. Yeah. Not that she would be a mender. Uh-huh. And, the resurrecting, or at least speaking to the dead, would be very interesting, because I don't think that's a signet power that actually exists in that world.
Exactly. In that world. And the golden dragon is so rare.
Mm-hmm. So it's so rare that a feathertail, which is what Andarna is at the time, will bond with a dragon because they're so young. Yeah. And the fact that Violet has bonded with such a young dragon is unusual, and so maybe that leads to an unusual signet.
Yeah. Any other thoughts going forward?
No, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. What about you?
I guess my final thought is overall that this book was great. Mm-hmm. It was a great first book. It had adventure. It had romance. It had obstacles.
Mm-hmm. It had kick-ass women. Not just Violet, but...
And it at some times it was a little gut-wrenching.
Oh, yeah. Especially near the end.
Yeah. But there was some surprises. There was no lull moments. Mm-hmm. I just found that it was exciting. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the rest of the series. I have Iron Flame in my wish list for Audible, and I also have Onyx Storm ready to pre-order, just waiting for it to come out in January.
I've got the second book upstairs ready to go, but yeah, I've also pre-ordered the third book.
Yeah, so I'm excited for what the rest of the series has to offer.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Well, before we go, I guess just remember to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. And also tell a friend, because a story continues beyond its pages. Bye!
Bye!